Hi everyone, it's Alice. Welcome back to another GRE video. Today we are looking at essays again, and this one happens to be an analyze and argument essay. Before we get into it, I want to remind all of you that I am still doing one-on-ones where you can sign up to talk to me for 30 minutes for free about anything GRE related. If you need some guidance, if you need essay help, if there is anything I can do GRE related to help you out, sign up with the link in the pinned comment down below. If you're watching this in the future and you want to know if I'm still doing this, pinned comment will also let you know about that. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and with that, let's get started. So here, this essay was submitted to me through Reddit. If you are interested in having your essay read, you can send it to me as well. But let's go ahead and first look at the prompt, break it down, and then look at what our test taker wrote and see what they did well and what they can improve on. So the prompt goes like this. 6 months ago, the region of Forestville increased the speed limit for vehicles traveling on the region's highways by 10 miles an hour. Here, this is a fact. Basically, it is setting up what the argument is going to be. Since that change took effect, the number of automobile accidents in that region has increased by 15%. So this is another fact, and it gives you an idea of what the argument is going to be. So it looks like there is an increase in the speed limit and then also an increase in the number of automobile accidents. So it looks like those two things are probably related, or the argument is going to say that they are. But the speed limit in Elmsford, a region neighboring Forestville, remained unchanged, and automobile accidents declined slightly during the same 6-month period. So again, this is another fact. It sets up a comparison group. So anytime you have an analyze and argument essay, you want to look out for this, the comparison group. Who is it that my main group is being compared to? And is that comparison something that makes logical sense? Now, obviously, because these arguments are written in such a way to emphasize logical fallacies, the comparison group is going to be flawed in some way. Therefore, if the citizens of Forestville want to reduce the number of automobile accidents in the region's highways, they should campaign to reduce Forestville's speed limit to what it was before the increase. So here we have the actual claim itself, one of the most important sentences in the entire prompt. And when you read this, you want to distill down into one sentence what it is that the argument is saying so that you know exactly what you're going to be talking about for the entirety of your essay afterwards. So here the claim is that based on Elmsford experience, Forestville should follow in the same footsteps, meaning that Forestville should go back to their original speed limit. You may also see that there is a small wording nuance here with the word campaign that usually brings about ideas of political campaigning or some sort of organization. And it's basically implied here that campaigning is going to be the best way to bring about this change. Now, this tends to be a lot smaller of an issue than the rest of the argument, saying that the way to reduce accidents in the first place is just to get the speed limit back down, but you can definitely point to this as something in your essay. Every essay will also have an actual question itself. Discuss how well reasoned you find this argument. So every question is going to be approximately the same, basically break down the argument and whether or not we should be able to believe it. All right, so based on that, let's see what our author wrote here. Okay, so the introduction paragraph says, the argument states that Forestville, a region in which the speed limit was increased, should campaign to reduce its speed limit if it wants to prevent accidents. It bases this conclusion on the statistic that accidents decreased slightly in Elmsford, a neighboring region in which the speed limit remain constant. This argument is inherently flawed due to three visible assumptions. So this is a relatively good, very solid introduction here for a few reasons. Number one, that the author or the test taker writes out what it is that's being argued. You don't want to assume that your reader knows exactly what it is you're talking about. So you want to outline what the argument is itself. And the second sentence here where it says it bases this conclusion on the statistic, blah, blah, blah. This is also really good because it sets the expectation of why somebody would argue whatever the point is from your first sentence. Now, me personally, if you've seen some of my other essay review videos, you know that I really don't like the type of sentence we have here on the bottom, where we say, this argument is inherently flawed due to three visible assumptions, because I like to actually write out what these assumptions are. I think it's very important to outline exactly what the reader should expect. So tell exactly what these three assumptions are, and then in your three body paragraphs, actually write out all of these assumptions, and then at the very end, review all of your assumptions again. So you are basically setting up your argument very clearly and repeating yourself so that your reader can follow along very easily. That would definitely be one point where the test taker could improve on. I also think this word here, visible, is a bit awkward. Assumptions are really not visible things. So because of that, I would try to choose something else, or just say three assumptions, comma, X, Y, and Z. So let's move on to the meat of the argument here. The first body paragraph says, firstly, the argument assumes that the highways in the region of Forestville are comparable to those in Elmsford. This is a really great topic sentence because it's very clear and you know exactly what this paragraph is going to be talking about. Now, the point that's going to be made here is the comparability argument. And what you want to remember when you're making an argument like this is not that these two regions necessarily cannot be compared. We actually have no idea if they can be compared or not, and that's the point. It's not that these regions are definitely different. It's that these regions could be different, and because of that, we need a lot more information before we can draw any conclusions. One thing that I see a lot in paragraphs about comparability are excessive speculation. And here in the following sentences, you can really see that in play. So here it says, perhaps Forestville's highways are highly unmaintained and full of broken roads and potholes. This would undeniably cause an increase in accidents at higher speeds. It is also possible that Forestville's highways are more commonly utilized than those in Elmsford. Forestville might be the center of a commercial area, while Elmsford might be a residential community. This would imply that most of Forestville's population utilizes its highways, while Elmsford's highways are largely empty throughout the year. Automobile accidents would thus be more pronounced in Forestville. Those 5 sentences make up the body of the first body paragraph, but you can really see here that all of these sentences are about the details, about what could possibly be different between Forestville and Elmsford. This is totally unnecessary, and this is why I call it excessive speculation. The reason that this is excessive and you really shouldn't do this is because if we look at it, and I can highlight this entire middle section, is about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the paragraph is talking about details that aren't in the prompt itself. Nowhere in the prompt does it talk about broken roads, does it talk about more commonly utilized? Does it talk about being a residential community, etc., etc.? And the fact that these things could be different between the two regions is way more important than exactly what these differences are. So because of that, instead of spending 5 whole sentences out of 7 talking about what it is that could be different between these two regions, you want to instead talk about what it means if Forestville and Elmsford are compared. So instead of saying that Forestville might be the center of a commercial area and Elmsford might be a residential community, you could say that comparing these two regions is going to lead to poor decision making, wasted money, wasted time, wasted resources, etc., etc. You could also talk about what information would be necessary in order to get this. So instead of having 5 sentences talking about what these are, I would say maybe 1 sentence saying perhaps Forestville is highly unmaintained or the center of a commercial area, while Elmsford has perfectly maintained streets and is a residential community. Because of this, the number of accidents in both of these areas would be completely different. That summarizes all of that information into 2 sentences instead of 5, and it gives you a lot more room than to talk about why that's important. And again, the importance is that you are making a false comparison, and basing your decision on faulty information is going to lead to really poor results. So here we also have the conclusion sentence. For this reason, the argument that Forestville should take any action based on the statistics of another reason is significantly weakened. So again, the reason is not that all of these comparability factors exist, it's that all of these factors haven't been accounted for when they really need to be, and not accounting for these differences makes these two regions incomparable. So focus on the logical reasoning and not the details, not the examples of what these reasons are. So it's better to say something like, not taking into account factors that make the highways of Forestville and Elmsford different, such as X and Y, means that you do not account for how anecdotal evidence can be applied in a different scenario. This context is important because it may directly explain the differences in accidents rather than the speed limit itself. You can see here that a sentence like that, focusing on the logic of the argument rather than the potential details, really is much more effective. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Secondly, the time period over which the results are analyzed is too short to conclusively demonstrate that the increase in automobile accidents was caused solely by the increase in the speed limit. What if, during the 6-month period, Forestville was having a professional convention? This would significantly increase the traffic through its highways, augmenting the number of automobile accidents that occurred there. Another possibility is that house prices in Forestville recently dropped, which caused more people to relocate there. With the rise in overall traffic, automobile accidents are expected to marginally increase. From this perspective, the argument is further denounced. Based on what I said about the previous paragraph, you can probably guess what I'm going to say here. But essentially, this argument is extremely weak because the writer is claiming that the flaw in the argument is the time period. But it's really not. The time period has almost no impact on the argument at all. And it's really more about the idea that other factors could exist that explain the difference between Forestville and Elmsford. So this argument is super similar to the above paragraph, and it's more or less actually the same under the guise of a different name. So this actually ties in a lot with the next paragraph, so let's look at that first. Finally, it is taken for granted that all conditions remain constant during the 6 months which automobile accidents was analyzed. Okay, so here the argument is that the change in the number of accidents isn't related to the change in speed limit, but rather something else. If, for example, weather conditions were particularly tumultuous in Forestville, driving conditions would be more dangerous and the number of automobile accidents would increase. Rain has been proven in many studies to be detrimental to a driver's control, and at increased speeds can cause delayed reaction times and increased stopping distances. Okay, so here, this is, again, excessive speculation. It doesn't matter what the weather conditions are, and the test taker here is really wasting a lot of space and explanation on details about what could be different when it really doesn't matter exactly what's different, just that things could be different. Again, when you're breaking down these arguments, it's not that the person is wrong or that the argument is incorrect. It's that the argument could be incorrect. You're really focusing on that possibility there. So you can still mention that weather is taken for granted as being constant, but don't write 3-4 lines here because you're really just wasting effort and time. The next sentence says, this would show that the data obtained from Elmsford highways cannot be used to make any changes to Forestville's highways. So this sentence is a huge problem because it's linking this third body paragraph to the first body paragraph. And because the second paragraph is essentially the same thing as well, it means that this test taker is confusing all of their points, and you're basically only left with one logical fallacy that you're trying to point out in the argument. Actually, this is a mistake because the rest of the paragraph here is really talking about comparability of the before and the after of Forestville's car accidents. It's not talking about the comparability of Elmsford and Forestville. These are two separate arguments that you want to make sure you really understand the difference of. Because of that, you really want to treat these two things separately, and this sentence tells me that the test taker confused themselves. Basically, for this third paragraph, I would probably say that you want to keep that first introduction sentence that says, all conditions remain constant during the 6 months in which automobile accidents were analyzed, or reword it to say that there is an underlying assumption here that there's no difference between the previous 6 months and the 6 months before and after the speed limit change. This paragraph is really about the before and after the speed limit change that can't be attributed to anything else, when in reality we know that, for example, auto accidents are more prominent in the winter when there is ice and snow on the roads. When you are writing your own analyze and argument essay, you want to be sure that you know exactly what the difference is between each of your paragraphs and that you are not confusing your own self. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, then your reader is going to be even more confused than you. When we're talking about the organization of all of these points as well, you probably actually want to start with this point, which is that the speed limit was responsible for the difference in car accidents to begin with, because technically this paragraph is making the claim that the difference in speed limits may not even account for the difference in car accidents. And if that's not the case, then why would you even need to talk about the difference between Forestville and Elmsford? So for me, this paragraph or this idea should actually be talked about first. Your second body paragraph can talk about the comparability between the two regions. Now, you might be a little scared because you will only have 2 points, but if you develop them well, if you explain yourself and you talk about not only the fact that these logical fallacies exist, but what could help the argument overcome these fallacies, you're going to have a way stronger essay than somebody who has 3 points but doesn't know how to explain themselves. And we have just our conclusion left at the end. In conclusion, Forestville should not make any haphazard decisions about its highways without further analyzing the true effects of the speed limit increase. Forestville is not likely comparable to Elmsford, and the time period over which the data was collected is too minuscule. Doing so could potentially be detrimental to the residents of Forestville. So one thing I really like about this conclusion is that the test taker actually does summarize each of the points that he made. So he doesn't just say, for the above reasons, Forestville should not change their speed limit or something like that. He does actually do a really good job about saying that the decision should not be haphazard because these are all of the concerns that we would have. The only way that I can see that would make this conclusion super strong is to add in information about what is missing from the current data to help us be able to make these conclusions. So if we knew the number of cars that Forestville and Elmsford have and they're comparable, then this argument would be a lot stronger. Something along those lines. Overall, I think this essay has a lot of good things going for it. It has identified two of the most important argument points that could be talked about for this prompt. I think that, again, the ideas are great, but they are unfortunately not very well developed, especially this idea of the confusion of points where the author seems like he knows what he's talking about, and then he has one or two sentences that make the reader question if he knows the difference between the two. There is also a lot of excessive speculation that takes away from the point, and it is almost off topic at some times. So I would say this essay is maybe about a 3, but there are a few things that can be implemented that would shoot up the score directly to a 5, possibly a 6. So definitely try to implement some of the things that I mentioned today. And if these essay reviews really help you, I will link to my playlist of all of my essay reviews that I've done. Don't forget to make an appointment with me, like and subscribe, leave a comment please. I read all of them and try to respond to as many as I can. I really appreciate you watching, and thanks so much. Hope you have a great day. Bye!